Hello, everyone, and welcome to this conversation about the career path for mid level finance professionals. We're just going to wait a few minutes for the rest of the audience to join in. In the meanwhile, we'd like to know more about who we're speaking to. So please use the chat to tell us your current role and how long you've been working in finance. Hello, Elizabeth. Hello, Gustav. Hello, Ahab. And Julie as well. Hello, Jasmine. Hello, Colleen. Hello, Elizabeth. Hello, Celia. Hello, Marco. All right, so we'll have a Q&A session towards the end of the discussion. So please put any of the questions that you have in the questions tab and vote for your favorite ones. Hello, Louis.
I'll be just quickly out of the screen. I trapped my cat in the kitchen and I forgot it was there, and I need to get rid of my cat.
All good for you, Jeremy? Is it all good?
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay. All right. Then let's get started. And welcome again to this discussion about the finance career path for mid-level finance professionals. This webinar is hosted by CFO Connect, a global community for finance leaders and aspiring CFOs. We are hosted by Spendesk, the smartest way to get full control and visibility over company spend. Let me introduce myself to begin with. I'm Vinita Manek. I've started my career in finance through audit at PwC and before moving into the French tech space. So moving on, I'll pass it on to you, Sahil.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sahil Kamani. I currently work as a financial controller at Grover Group. We're a tech rental company. I've got almost a decade of experience in finance. First 6 years I've spent of my career mostly in corporate finance, where I also had the opportunity to work for the SEC. I'm from Malaysia, so I work for the Malaysian SEC. I've been in Germany for the last 4 years, where I've now moved myself towards a more operational finance role, and really looking forward to sharing more insights with you guys today. Thank you.
Melissa?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa. I'm from Peru. Currently, I work as a finance business partner at N26. My domain is called Financial Empowerment. So that is currently known in the market as strategic finance, and financial empowerment represents the lending and investment business that we currently have. Like Sahil, I liked how he framed it. I have a decade of experience. I started my career at corporate banks in Latin America through different divisions of finance, FP&A, controlling, investor relations, business cases. I came to Europe to do my MBA, and I worked advising different types of startups more in a strategic roles. So startups that range from investment banking, gaming, edtech startups, and currently putting all of that experience together at N26.
Thank you, Melissa. And Jeremy?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Jeremy. I'm working as a financial controller. for Kering, so a luxury brand. I've been working financial controlling, business controlling for about 7-8 years, mostly in Germany. So I grew up and studied in France, but then moved here for my work career.
Okay. Thank you. Let's start with an easy question, but also the question that we do not like during interviews. Where do you plan to be in 5 years? And let's start with you, Melissa.
That was exactly what I was going to say. That reminds me so much of interview questions. So I think first we need to understand, to be able to answer that, is that everybody's in different paths and that companies change as well. So because companies are changing, the roles of finance leaders are evolving. So we have CFOs among startups, scale-ups, listed companies. I've worked among the different ones, and I can differentiate right now how the styles are different. In some, CFOs need to be more hands-on as teams are smaller. In others, they cover more diversified topics like tax, accounting, M&A, investor relations. And finally, we have divisional CFOs that drive performance of the business. To be honest, this is the part that I enjoy from finance and where I see myself growing towards too.
Sahil?
Sure. So, I mean, again, as Melissa said, it's always an interesting question, right? Where you see yourself in 5 years. I would like to break it down a bit more, and rather than, I think whenever people get asked this question, it always sort of alludes to a position, or sort of a level in the division that you want to progress to. But for me, I would like to keep it shorter. Well, I think it's nice to have a vision of what you'd like to be in 5 years. For me personally, I always like to break it down within a 2 to 3 year bandwidth. It's already of like, what am I going to do by the end of the year? What I want to do next year? So for me personally, I would like to embark more on a mentorship approach where, we now have a new generation of people. You were saying 5 years, so Vinita, so, that would be 15 years of work experience for me, where we already would have a completely new generation entering the workforce. So this is where I would like to build this sort of mentorship, and being able to, connect with them and also educate them, and on the same time sort of also understand where they're coming from and how work is going to change in this time period. And now we have seen also with ChatGPT and AI sort of taking over, there's this fear of how it's really going to change finance. So for me, I want to have my thumb on that pulse and really see what's going to happen in that sort of time period. So yeah, that's how I look at it.
Okay. Thank you, Sahil. That was really interesting. And Jeremy?
So I mean, the classic position is always like the vertical ascent. You become manager, and like lead a bigger team, a division, a group, and become eventually like CFO of a huge corporate. Or there's also like the horizontal one where you become, I think, expert in a certain topic, say like a specific tool or a specific topic like in finance, such as, I don't know, cash flow statement. And I actually I've been thinking about this lately, and Sahil, you have actually a good point on that, is also like become an expert and also give back that knowledge. So I had the chance to work last month, for example, with some external consultants who were like maybe like 30 years older than me. So they knew everything already, and they were just there to support me because we're lacking resources, and they were there to teach me, to tell me, hey, this is how you could do it, this is how you could do it, and improve. And I find that very interesting. So maybe in the next 5 years as well, in the next 30 years, let's see how it's going to be like.
All right. Moving on, how important is cultivating your working relationships and networking to someone in a finance role? Because I think most of the people who are not from a finance background usually think it's quite dull and it's an isolating job. So please let us know what the working relationships and how networking is important in our jobs.
I mean, I would also link it with scaling in your career, because that's very important. And sometimes that's even more important than the finance role itself. And I tell you because from experience in my case, I can quickly tell you an example. Some years ago, there was a work reduction in the company where I worked for. Like my boss was laid off, a lot of the people within finance, and for me, it was a big opportunity to get promoted. So I worked really hard. I did valuations. I took up his position, took up on his projects, mentored my team, started revising what everybody was doing, but I was in the shadows. So the new CFO didn't know what I was doing. And eventually I didn't get promoted. Looking back later, learning from that experience, I did something completely opposite in another role. So I started building relationships with people, with my stakeholders, making sure that they were vouching for me later on in my career as well. And me talking to my leaders, to my managers, making my work visible so that they didn't see me working in the shadows. And that got me promoted. That got me to scale up and be able to progress in my career, which was like a very big learning experience from them. And it also makes your job easier, to your second point. Like when we finance people have more connections to the people that we're digging into their business, it makes the controlling part easier because you build a more finance business partnering role there.
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa. I completely agree with you. I think it's important to not just build relationships, but also build a trusting relationship with the partners that we work with. Sahil, what do you think about this?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I want to take a page out of what Melissa said. 2 points of view. Maybe we can start one with the networking bit, which I found very interesting. What you said, Melissa, sort of, having your work sort of put out there and be seen. I think that's also a very important point. A lot of juniors also come up to me and ask me like, "Hey, I'm a junior accountant. How do I put myself out there? Because you have this relationship with the CFO, but I just joined 6 months ago. I'm still new. How do we do that, right?" So it's also a lot about asking questions, and this way, when you ask questions, you go up to someone, probably in a different department or who's more senior than you. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Of course, ask the right questions. Don't be the annoying person asking annoying questions, but asking the sort of right questions. And sometimes you don't know if it's right, but this is an intuition that you would build up. And through this, there's also a form of network or relationship building. There's an aspect to that because now the stakeholder knows that, hey, actually, I've transferred my knowledge onto this person in finance. And now this person, your job is to actually relay this to your seniors, your team lead, etc. So that's one interesting part, Melissa, which you said. And now sort of borrowing the second part of what Melissa also said, which is the CFO. So here's what I find really interesting. And actually throughout my career, I've actually observed, I've come into contact with many different kinds of CFOs. I'm not one to sort of bucket people into a category, but for the sake of discussion, let's do that right here. So I'm going to go with 4 categories that I've seen the kind of CFOs that I've sort of come up to and interacted with. One would be the accountant CFO. So this person, would be more sort of careful with the guidelines and policies and, like to stay within the framework. And I'll get to my point on why this is important, these are CFOs. And the other CFO that I've come across is sort of the SME, mid-sized company CFO who really has their hands on every finance topic out there, right? So you've got that second type, and then you have the growth CFO. So the startup growth CFO who's got this very growth mindset, probably of an investment banking background and such, and is really about growth. And then you've got the visionary CFO, the ones that go out there, write books, and they really have their view on the macro environment. And this is, these are the 4 categories that I've seen. Every category has their their pros and cons, of course. What I'm trying to get at is that for us as finance people who sort of work below in the working level, it's important to identify what kind of CFO you're working with, right? Because then you can sort of get yourself involved into projects that this CFO has a particular focus towards, right? So that way you are getting visibility and you're getting resources as well to fuel your respective projects. And this can be something that will really help you in your career. Of course, apart from your daily tasks, but just sort of think about it more strategically when taking on projects or when coming up with your own projects. What does my CFO really want? Ask that question and put it out there.
Thank you, Sahil. I think that was super clear. What soft skills do mid-level finance professionals need to cultivate in order to advance their careers or excel in their current positions? What is it that they can bring now to set them up for success in the future? Jeremy?
Yeah. So I'm gonna tell you, like, start with actually easy story. When I started working, my first internships, I was assigned some task and like Excel job, like mind crushing, and like you spend the whole day working on it. At the end of the day, you just don't understand anymore what you did, or the worst case is in the evening you think you have a great idea, and then the next day you look at it and you're wondering what came through your mind. And in the end, you just go to your boss or manager and show your result, and completely lost yourself. You lost yourself in your figures. And so one of the major, I think, skill is actually to be able to stand back, to look back at what you did, and like think about, hey, what would someone else who doesn't know anything about my work react to my job. And I think it's some sort of like a mix of empathy, but also like let's call it like clear vision of your own work, is to be able to have like a critical view. And obviously, like it's easy to say and much harder to do it, because once you're in there, it's just really hard to look from another perspective. So I think that's this kind of critical thinking and this ability to stand back is like one of the main, the first like soft skill, I would say. The second one is what also saying you quickly mentioned is also like the ability to understand what actually your stakeholders, and not just your CFO, but people you're working with need. If you go to a CFO who has plan on the moon and who wants to like, reach the sky, then either you go along with him because you think you can find the financials behind to support his decisions, or you also have to be the one telling him, look, it's not possible because of these reasons. Like, we're not generating enough cash flow, we're not enough profitable of these things. So it's just being able to kind of adapt yourself to your own audience. So talking about CFO, talking about also as a business partner to like specific like divisions of your company. Let's say you go talk to marketing people. They don't want to hear about your accounting. They don't want to hear about your P&L. They just want easy figures like invoice or things like this. So yeah, these are for me, I think, the two main skills. And then a third one, I found out, and I'm still trying to practice it, but still not there, from one of my former boss. So we would have these monthly reviews, for example, of the financials with the CFO. And, you prepare your analysis, you think, okay, you have everything straight. You compare against your budget, against your previous month, previous year, you have everything correct. And then comes a question like that you saw from nowhere, you don't know how to answer. And, that ability to kind of improvise and find a quick solution is, I saw it happening. It's kind of crucial in a way. People who have the ability to just build trust and, come up with an answer.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy. Sahil, would you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I want to jump on Jeremy's point as well, where he mentioned a very interesting thing, this finance business partner, right? So this is something they don't teach us in business school, unfortunately. I mean, we're taught, like, we're given heavy training on accounting, finance topics, economics, but there's nothing about, soft skills, which is such a huge part of this role, especially as you advance in your career. It's a lot about keeping in touch with the people, with your various stakeholders and through the business. You need to really have your thumbs on the pulse of the business, and then you need to convey this to your respective CFO and your finance leadership teams, because then that's how information is relayed these days. And we need to evolve our mindsets as well from being just sort of in working in silos. I think Melissa and Jeremy, you both mentioned this very rightfully, sort of working in silos, working on your Excel spreadsheets. But then you need to come up with, you need to have that story angle. And this story actually comes from your different stakeholders. And they will only share this with you if you're able to cultivate these sort of relationships with them. And if I can take it a step, a notch above that as well, and cultivating relationships also means that you need to invest some time and effort into this. Again, this is not something they teach you in business school, but you need to go the mile above and really contribute to this relationship building. This could mean a coffee chat, a random coffee chat that you could schedule with a stakeholder once a month, just to get get an idea on how the business is running. Or this could even be a simple lunch, a scheduled lunch. These are just some ideas. And of course, depending on the company that you work for, given it's traditional, given it's startup, given it's an MNC, there are different various ways of networking and opportunities. And of course, this is up to you and how you want to leverage on that.
Yeah. Thank you, Sahil. I completely agree with both Jeremy and Sahil. It's super important for us to cultivate those kind of relationships with our business partners, and I also believe that the profession of finance is evolving. What we saw 10 years ago or 5 years ago does not stand true anymore, and we have to. So hence the business schools also, I guess, need to evolve with time. Thank you. So let's move on to the next question. And I think as you move on in your career in finance, one of the most important things that we learn, especially I know that I've learned, is storytelling, is not just number crunching on Excel sheets, but being able to convey what those numbers mean to other stakeholders who do not necessarily understand what a P&L or balance sheet stands for. So what would finance people need to turn numbers into a compelling story? How can they do this? How can they best achieve converting those numbers into something that is comprehensible to non-finance people? I'd love to hear what Melissa has to say.
Sure. This is actually one of my favorite parts of the role and of the business. And I mean, I'd say there's three main directions here. Sahil nailed it on the first one when he explained about building relationships and working with stakeholders. Because first, like, to understand numbers, you need to understand the business. Like, if you're working in a traditional company, the backbone of the business is operations. If it's a tech company, for example, product managers there need to become your best friends. Like, you have to learn, what are they looking at the discovery phase? What are the challenges that they're bringing? What are the pain points of the customers? Like, what are they currently facing? And you have to be involved in those conversations. And for that, you need to build relationships with the people so that they can tell you and invite you to those meetings so that you can understand it. Like, once you have that background, the storytelling flows more easily. The second point, which I really like to do as well, is now you know the information and you need to display it better. So you have to make it sure, like, sometimes we fall into the trap of presenting P&Ls, which is good for finance, but for someone that doesn't have a finance background, they get confused with so many numbers and they don't understand. Like, I can show a very good P&L and somebody that's not finance background will think everything is going wrong because they see a lot of variations, but at the end of the day, the business is profitable. So it's coming up with nice visualizations, graphs that you can think more out of the box. And here, Vinita, you nailed it when finance is evolving, because we are the ones that have to bring these things into the table as well. And finally, the last part would be learning how to summarize it, like a slide, one title that explains the complete message of what you're trying to get across, and then 3 main takeaways that you want the audience to take. And not only that, like, what's your call to action? What problems are you trying to solve ideally? And with all of these 3 points together, you should be able to build a compelling storyline as well.
Right. Thank you, Melissa. I think we've spoken quite a bit about soft skills so far. So I was wondering, what hard skills can we take with us to the next level? What would be useful, and what should we as mid-level finance professionals be focusing on to develop and take our career to the next step? Jeremy?
Yeah. So, well, now it becomes the boring part, so to say, the very technical ones. And I'm talking from a controller perspective and also from my own story, let's say, know your accounting. Because we are the point between, like as a controllers, as business partners, we are the link between the accounting department and the business part outside the world of finance. Because for the rest of the world, accounting equals finance equals like controllers, they are accountants. That's my experience so far. So yeah, you have to dig into that, because I also remember like having so many times, like explanations from accounting, but then you go to your business partner, you go to your CFO, to your managers, and you're not really confident with the explanation. You don't really have your own word actually to phrase it, and then it's a pretty embarrassing situation. So I mean, for example, I studied accounting in business school, but like really getting into the books of your company, like knowing okay what's going on, and not just taking the explanation for granted, but just actually making links between basically your P&L, your balance sheet, and the impact on the cash flow. It's just crucial. And yeah, I think for the first years in my at work, I was lacking these skills, and so I can tell from my own experience that it was bad. Also, I think it's second technical skill is just basically mastering the basic tool. Like I don't know, most companies are using either Oracle or SAP. Well, like when you're an expert in this thing, a lot of people like come to you after and will need you to be able to use these things, because it's still very scary tools that nobody wants to use apart from finance people. And when you are the kind of the magician in the room who knows how to fix these issues, and you solve a lot of things. And then I think it's more like in relation to what we talked about earlier about ChatGPT, about just automation, is like knowing like one trendy tool. So at the moment I see it a lot in controlling. It's BI tools. Well, probably automation. ChatGPT is going to come up in a way or another into our daily work. So yeah, I think these are like knowing your accounting, knowing your like the basic tool that everybody is using, but not really knowing, and then the trendy tool for the future, so to say.
Thank you. I think that's a great point, Jeremy, and especially on the tools that everybody needs, but nobody wants to use it. But I wouldn't blame them as well, because given how our accounting tools look like, it's it's best kept within a few people. Melissa, what hard skills do you think that we need?
Sure. So I would emphasize as well on Jeremy's points, especially the beginning on accounting learning. Like it's really the basis of what we're doing. Just for an example, I took accounting 3 times in my bachelor, in my master's in finance, in my MBA, and every time I learned something different and how to connect more the dots, and that now is very useful because I can actually understand what are the connections between balance sheets, P&L, cash flow, what's happening in the company, and being able to explain it as well to people or understand what's the accrual process that we have to take. So it's really, I cannot stress enough on this point. Another thing, without repeating what Jeremy already pulled into, which has been useful for me, is modeling skills. So especially if we want to build, I mean, if the role is more on a controlling FP&A focused role, here at the end of the day, we are the ones, like I say to the teams, bring our crystal balls and build models and tell them, hey, this is the impact of the initiatives that you're bringing on, or this is how profitability will look at the end of the year. And we're kind of predicting what's going to happen. And I really enjoy that part. But there you also have to be able to know what inputs and what are the main drivers to put into a model so that you can predict the future. So yeah.
I definitely agree, especially now that we are all entering into a refocused phase. Probably that's a great tip, Melissa. Thank you. So we were talking about evolution within the finance profession, and we touched upon it lightly before. But what do you think is the next for mid-level finance professionals, and where do we go from here towards our career? So, if I have to see myself now, 30 years later, how would the finance profession would look like? How would you think it would evolve? Right, Sahil, let's begin with you.
Sure. I mean, we've gone from 5 years to 30 years in just half an hour, so that's progress, right? I mean, it's interesting because I mean, this question makes me think of this new trend that sort of people have been asking for, which is vertical versus horizontal career progression. I think Jeremy, you mentioned this earlier. So let's today let's do something a bit radical and decenter the myth that vertical growth is the only form of development that we have. That is, if you look back in our parents' career, where it's just been like, okay, junior, and then controller, and then head of department, and then VP, and so on and so forth, all the way up to CFO, right? So this is sort of the traditional path that we know of, that probably our parents' generation have been put through, and also still till today, a lot of traditional companies still go through that, right? But given that how things have evolved so fast in our generation alone, and how it's going to evolve even faster as we go on in the next 10, 20, and Vinita, you mentioned the big number, 30 years. I mean, I think we need to sort of decenter this myth, right? So why horizontal career movement is also not spoken about enough. This means sort of collecting experiences along the same path. But this also means sometimes where you take 2 steps back just to take 2 steps forward. And what I mean by that, so in my career, as I mentioned before, I moved from corporate finance into operational finance. I had no background in operational finance. I didn't really know how an accounting team would work back in my early career. But so then I had to sort of take a step back. I couldn't just go in and become a manager or something, right? I had to go in and really learn the ropes of these respective departments before I'm able to advance to the next step. So this is what I mean, where you take 2 steps back just to take 2 steps forward. So I think we need to broaden our mindset to really think out of the box, especially when it comes to our own career growth, and be a bit more innovative and nimble about it, just how startups are, right? So I think, I mean, Melissa and I, we both work for startup, Vinita, yourself as well. And this is interesting because startups give us this opportunity to sort of grow within sort of different roles linearly, rather than going up vertically. So maybe these are some opportunities that we can get. And again, it comes down to this whole networking thing between speaking to different stakeholders. You never know when you may develop an interest in another department, which can really help you in your finance role. So this is something that we got to keep our minds open to. Yeah.
Thank you, Sahil. I think that was a great point, especially about the myth of vertical growth just being there. Especially, I relate to it a lot. If you look at my career path, I was an auditor before, which is not. It's completely different. Then I moved into controlling, and now I'm in FP&A. So it really helps see that horizontal growth and demyth, especially with younger professionals who are in the finance field, to see that there is growth opportunities horizontally as well, and not every time just a step up on the ladder means that you're doing well in your career. So thank you, Sahil. Jeremy, what do you think?
So so let's go back to the first question, like in 30 years or so the thing is, I guess anyway, like automation is going to take over in general, like artificial intelligence. I did like a very first internship in audits, and they were already talking about it like a few years ago. Last year I was at a seminar, and someone was mentioning how basically like we can automate all the invoice payment and booking. So I think the challenge for all of us in finance is going to be able to stay still relevant while the main task, basic task, will be automated. So let's say like the entire accounting, payable, receivable is just going to be automated because like some 10, 15 years, it's just going to be easy to send invoice back in here and it's all going to be easy. Then our job is just going to make sure that, how do we think about the growth of the company? How do we make sure that the process, the controls are in place? So it's going to actually help us add more value to our own work by getting rid of the more manual tasks. But maybe also ChatGPT will come up with, like a program how to make a company profitable, and then we also have a job and we better find something else. But I think in the next 30 years, it's just gonna be like AI is gonna be definitely the biggest challenge. How we can just slide with be on top of that trend. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeremy. I also agree that automation is the next step in most of our careers, where we're going to see a lot of the processes being automated. But I would also like to have a call back to the first question we had about relationships and the importance of storytelling, because I think that's where our expertise would lie in the end, is to be able to transform those numbers and tell a compelling story to the stakeholders and the board members. So I wouldn't take up much more time. Melissa.
Sure. So just to share a different approach, because Sahil mentioned that one of the paths is more like horizontally, not necessarily vertically. There's like another approach where we can grow with teams below us. And that brings, again, the topic of soft skills that we need for that, because that demands a lot of leadership, that demands us motivating other people to work with us and for us as well. So here I would say that when I had my team in Dubai, for example, that were very different backgrounds. It was a startup. There were people that were doing marketing, data analytics, different sort of things. And for me at the beginning, it was understanding like what was their strengths, what were they good at. And as a finance professional, maybe you have someone that really likes storytelling, another one that likes building models, another one that likes pulling out data. Like how to identify and build a high performing team is leveraging on your team's strengths, but also like let's not forget the weakness, and this is the part that is more challenging but I think more interesting, because here we get to push people out of their comfort zones of what they don't like to do. I remember her, one young girl that she hated speaking in front of everybody, and I would push her every week to tell us a different topic, come present, show it a different way, and she got better, and at the end of the day she was pitching to investors. So it's making sure we identify these things, but also making sure that our teams are growing, and that's a growth for ourselves as well, because we build a high performing team at the end. And the last important part I would say there, because I currently face it at N26, and I imagine that's what a lot of people are facing at startups or any sort of company that's building from the ground up, is the part that you have to do a lot of fighting and working different task flows. And there, like, it's on you to prioritize, to see, okay, this is what's going to have the biggest impact. This is how I'm going to allocate the resources that I have right now. And this is how we're going to transform the P&L. So I would say a combination of the three.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. I think we have time for another question before we move on to Q&A. So we spoke about technology and ChatGPT a bit in the last question. So how does technology, and more specifically automation, factor into our roles as mid-level finance professionals? How can we leverage the tech that we have today, or the tools that we have at our disposition, to take our career to the next level? Sahil, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, that's a pretty loaded question, right? I think if we had the answer to that, all of us, we could probably retire by tomorrow. No, but just kidding. I mean, I think we have to. I mean, we have to look at it from a day-to-day sort of perspective as well. Again, coming back to my first point where I said, when you asked me, Vinita, where do I see myself in 5 years? I think it's nice to have a vision again. And I think the vision is, as Jeremy, I think, has perfectly articulated throughout this discussion, is that AI is definitely going to revolutionize finance. I mean, finance is a very traditional field of of audits, of reports, month-end closing, etc., right? But AI is definitely going to revolutionize it. How it's going to happen, we have completely no idea, right? But again, coming back to my point, which I said again, I think it's important to have this sort of openness and willingness to learn and know that things will change, right? Things are always changing. We may not see it as much on a daily basis, but if you put your finger on a 5-year or 10-year time frame, you can see that things have already evolved. We're using so many, like even just Jeremy mentioned SAP and Oracle. I mean, they've come up with so many newer versions of their own ERP systems, right, which have evolved with time. They've gone to the cloud, and next thing you know, they're definitely going to put ChatGPT in there. I mean, everyone in their life is putting ChatGPT within their tool. So definitely this sort of movement is going to come from these software and supplier and ERP providers for sure. Even I would also foresee planning tools changing, becoming a lot more innovative, and definitely they're going to incorporate some elements of AI into this. But I would just tell people out there that don't worry. There is a big finance community out there. There are many people actually who are already thought leaders and are thinking about this. So let's let them do the thinking. We can just see what they have to say, and then learn off of them, right? So end of the day, it's about keeping a really open mind. It's about really having this willingness to learn and invest time and your own resource into really understanding how the field is going to evolve. But again, a lot of people have this worry that the robots are going to take our jobs. They're not going to take our jobs, guys. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think we could move on to the Q&A session, unless Melissa or Jeremy, you have something to add to what Sahil just said.
I think he covered it perfectly.
Perfect. So I'd also like to ask, okay, let's move on to the questions. If you have any questions for our panelists, please write them in the questions tab. Meanwhile, let's start with the first question that we have here from Harry. Can you share how you got to where you are today? What did you do to get to a higher career level? Melissa, do you want to take the question?
Sure. I thought it was pointed towards Sahil for some reason. No, okay.
There isn't any name mentions. I'm just.
No, it's just a combination of everything we just discussed, right? So focusing a lot on building first my hard skills. So I studied a lot. I did courses on Power BI, data pooling systems. I did a master's in finance because I wanted to specialize in modeling, because that's the part that I really enjoyed. But at the end of the day, I also reached a point in my career where I realized that I needed to combine all of that with soft skills. And the soft skills part is more the relationship building part, the getting to know who are the people that are taking the decision, and making sure that the work that you're doing is visible. Because my mistake in the past was working under the shadows, and I'm just a simple part of asking questions, even though if they're dumb, but you want people to clarify things, already puts you on the radar. So making sure that the management and the people that were taking promotion decisions were actually knowing what I was doing. That was very important combined. So it's a matter of both. Yeah. And in our case in finance, I guess the soft skill, the hard skills that we have to do are more than other types of industries. But I mean, that's the role, right?
Yeah. Thank you. Would you guys like to add something, Sahil, Jeremy?
Yeah, sure. I could add something here. I mean, for me at least, it's definitely been 5 years ago. Again, if you ask me like, hey, how do you see where do you see your career going, and I would have been like, yeah, I want to be CFO by a certain point in time and such, and of course that. But now it's sort of changed. I think I've also had this experience, and I've taken risks in my career, which before were not a thing which I used to do. But these risks have really taught me that I'm actually here for the passion, ironically, of being with a high growth company or a company that's restructuring, right? So for me to see this project through, like let's say the restructuring project, which was a company I was with before, to really see that through was something that really motivated me to advance. And this is coming back to that whole vertical horizontal growth part, which I learned through my career and my experiences, that actually horizontal growth is also really fun, because you get to capture all of these different experiences in different shapes and form and sizes, and that's only if you can keep your mind open to it. So I would say definitely taking risks and having an open mind.
Thank you, Sahil. I actually did my first interview, the first interview with PwC at the age of 21. And at that time, my ambition was to become an audit partner at PwC. So at the end of the interview question, he asked me, where do you see yourself? And I was like, I see myself as being the partner at PwC. And I'm clearly not today. So I think what is important is also us asking and reassessing our own needs and what we think is necessary for us as a person, and how we could also change our careers either horizontally or vertically to achieve those needs. So I think it's important for us to keep reassessing and asking ourselves the questions: where am I today? Am I happy with it? And is this something that I see myself doing for the next 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years? Let's move on to the next question from George. How do you recommend building a good relationship and communication between accounting and finance and other departments? Jeremy, would you like to take this question?
Sure. Easy one, very easy one. Make sure that the invoices for this department are paid in time. Make sure that they don't get any reminder from the supplier like, hey, the invoices are not being paid and what's going on. It's simple as that, but it's very effective. Second one, I think like was mentioned by everyone during the call, is building up a kind of business partnership. So it depends again on the structure of the company, but let's say that in one of my previous jobs, I was the business partner with the marketing department. So the goal is, okay, you understand what they need, and you try to explain also what was the perspective of finance, and you basically try to find the middle ground between both departments. And I think it's just in general being there to help them if they have any issues. I had another case with the marketing department where I don't know, they had unpaid invoices. Okay, that's fair. But the company they were working with was based in France. So I took over the topic, and like it was beyond controlling, but since language helped, you can think about this way. There's not enough like ways. There's a lot of ways you can figure out how to improve the relationship. But the idea is, as long as you make their life easier, then that's how you build a better relationship. And that's the case for building up relationship with other departments as well as with your managers. Make their life easier.
Thank you, Jeremy. I think we have an interesting question from Tim here. How can I find mentors to help me grow personally and increase my knowledge of finance? Sahil, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, sure. I mean, great question, right? And I also pondered over that a lot. I have one word: LinkedIn. I think this is the easiest and most convenient platform for any working professional to reach out to people who you feel that you can connect with. So there are loads of LinkedIn influencers, especially within our space, the FP&A controlling. All you have to do is search for them. There's loads of people out there. Paul Banhurst, Chris Vatig, Nicolas Boucher. I mean, there are loads of these guys who I have also connected with personally and reached out to them, and they're very helpful, very friendly. They share content like almost on a daily basis, and this will really help you in your day-to-day and your mid to long-term career growth. So, I mean, this is one example, of course, which is a virtual. But within your company as well, if there's someone you can identify who you feel is who's someone who's there and you want to be like them, then definitely reach out to them. People love to be asked to be mentored, so don't be shy. Put yourself out there, have a coffee chat with someone you want to talk to, and if they don't happen to work in your company, reach out to them on LinkedIn and just ask. There's no harm asking, and the benefit is always yours end of the day.
Thank you, Sahil. I guess your LinkedIn is going to be flooded with messages later today. We have another question from Maisa. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. How to become a CFO in another country and what are the main challenges? Melissa?
I mean, I've worked in different companies, but not CFO level position. But I mean, at least from the experience where I've been, I guess one of the first challenges to tackle is the cultural aspect, right? Depending on how different the culture is. Like I've worked in the Middle East where the culture was totally different. And at the beginning, when I was going through interviews, just to make sure that I was getting my point across correctly, I would express myself differently. And that's the same in Germany. It's the same in Latin America. When I had a German boss and I was presenting my numbers, for him I was overconfident. Well, that's how we were in Latin America. When you show your work, you're confident at what you're doing. And these clashes can, especially at that level, at the civil level, where you have to build relationships with different people, is the first thing that I would take into consideration. Like there are very good books about understanding the cultures and differences between other countries. So, yeah.
Thank you, Melissa. I think we have a wide audience that's really interested in this question. I think we could take one more question before wrapping it up. How can I find balance between my own personal growth and managing a team and their development? This question is from George. So, would anyone, Jeremy?
Can you repeat the question?
How can I find balance between my own personal growth and managing a team and their development?
Personal growth, is it work related or is it personal life actually?
I'd say personal growth in the career sense, yeah, from our career sense.
I mean, because if you're managing a team, then I've seen so far is the goal of a manager is to manage. It's not to do the work. If the team is working efficiently, then you know how to assign the team. You know what their tasks are, and you're just there behind to check that the machine rolls and that the work is delivered. And then that's how you also, at the same time, by actually working, by managing your team, you grow personally, because you have to on the other side now. You're telling people what to do, but you also like managers today are not like just, oh, you do that, and people are just sitting and saying yes boss. People are more and more like, we're flattening more and more the relationship. So as a manager, it's more work in the sense that you also have to take into account other people's emotion more than as if you were just the employee, because you want to make the whole team work. And that's I see it as a personal way of growing, actually.
Yeah, thank you. I think I completely agree that growing your team also helps you grow personally as well in your career. Well, thank you so much to our panelists, Melissa, Jeremy, and Sahil, for joining us today. And thank you for the audience for attending this webinar on career path for mid-level finance professionals. We'll send you a video replay of the webinar, so make sure that you have your eye out for it, and please do not hesitate to share it with your network. CFO Connect is an amazing community of finance professionals. Join today and learn from the best in business. We'll put the link in chat so you can explore all of our resources. Thank you again and see you at the next webinar.